So, as you probably all realize at this point by the very grammatically correct sign behind me, minus the question mark and with weird capitalization. But what do you expect from Amazon? As you probably realize, today is Pastor Mark and Jenny's last Sunday with us on staff. And as I was thinking about what to preach on today, I was like, well, what would really just be fitting for my experience with them? So today's message is all about stubbornness. I'm just kidding. Well, it is actually about stubbornness, but it's not because of Pastor Mark. We're actually continuing on in our series about the prophets, and today we're going to switch kingdoms. We're going to head to Judah with a prophet named Jeremiah. Oh, doesn't like Jeremiah? Okay. So we're talking about the prophet Jeremiah, and actually the connection that would be made with Mark and Jenny with the prophet Jeremiah is that Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet. And the weeping is the thing that most likely lines up with what we're going to be experiencing as they leave us today. So if you're following along with your sermon notes, today's message is called Jeremiah Part 1. And we're going to be in the book of Jeremiah, but also a little bit in the book of Lamentations. So to get you guys caught up, if you don't know where we're at in our series, God started up his work with a nation, and he worked through prophets and judges. That's how God, ruled his chosen people. But they wanted a king, and so God agreed that they could have a king, even though it was a bad idea. They had the kings do the political work from that point on, and prophets did the spiritual. But just 3 kings into the system, they couldn't agree on who would be the next king, and so they split. They went with Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And then eventually Israel kept turning away from God, and last week we saw that God scattered Israel using Assyria, and they were no longer a nation. So all that's left now is the southern nation of Judah. And this is where Jeremiah comes in to do his job. He was born at about 655 BC, and he worked until about 570 BC. And the way that we actually get Jeremiah's message is interesting. The way that we get his book, it was actually specifically told to him by God that he needed to write a book. In Jeremiah 36, verse 2, it says, "Take a scroll and write on it all the words that I have spoken to you against Israel and Judah, and all the nations from the day I spoke to you, from the days of Josiah until today. It may be that the house of Judah will hear all the disaster that I intend to do to them, so that everyone may turn from his evil way, and that I may forgive their iniquity and their sin." Then Jeremiah called Baruch the son of Neriah, and Baruch wrote on a scroll at the dictation of Jeremiah all the words of the Lord that he had spoken to him. So God says, Jeremiah, write this down. And this is from chapter 36, so obviously this is a ways into Jeremiah's story when God finally says, hey, write down everything that's happened. And then he keeps writing a little bit more. And God says, you've been warning all these people for years. You've been warning them, but now they're getting to the point where this is going to actually come to fruition, because judgment is almost here. Before that happens, we're going to need some documentation for all of this. So if you grab your Connect card on the way in this morning, here's your first fill in the blank. When something is important, God makes it clear. When something is important, God makes it clear. So Jeremiah writes down everything that happens up to that point, plus a little bit after, and now we have the book of Jeremiah. And it's important that we realize the extent of the issues that Judah has been dealing with. See, Jeremiah was in his 20s when Isaiah passed away. And then he basically takes that torch and he carries it on. And really the message from Isaiah into Jeremiah hasn't really changed. In Jeremiah 5:21, it says, "Hear this, O foolish and senseless people, who have eyes but see not, who have ears but hear not." We might realize this sounds very familiar to a passage we read in Isaiah. In Isaiah 6:10, it says, "Make the heart of this people dull and their ears heavy, and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn and be healed." So nothing has changed from Isaiah's day until Jeremiah's day. It was basically the same thing. They're saying, repent and turn back to God, and here's your warning. By the way, God knows you're not going to listen, so judgment is coming. Your eyes are shut, your ears are shut, and your hearts are hard. But then we see more similarities when we get to chapter 7, 7:27. It says, "So you shall speak all these words to them, but they will not listen to you. You shall call to them, but they will not answer you." You might realize that this is also familiar to Isaiah's story. Remember when Isaiah went into the throne room and he saw this vision of God, and God was looking for a messenger, and he said, "Who am I going to send?" And Isaiah said, "Here I am, Lord, send me." Well, what did God tell him to say to them? Isaiah 6:9. And he said, "Go and say to this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. So again, nothing has changed from Isaiah into Jeremiah. And then it goes on even more. Remember, Isaiah's book is a two-parter. Isaiah's book was like a mini Bible. The first part was about judgment. The second part was about hope. And they were represented by a tree. That God built up a beautiful tree, chopped it down, purified it, and then something new, Christ, came growing from that. Well, Jeremiah 1:10 says, "See, I have set you this day over nations and over kingdoms, to pluck up and to break down, to destroy and to overthrow, and to build and to plant." So the judgment is there the same way. It's plucked, it's broken, it's destroyed, it's overthrown. But then there's also hope in that it will be rebuilt and replanted. So it's the same imagery. Jeremiah is carrying on Isaiah's message. He keeps talking to Judah about the exact same stuff. Now, what does that tell us? The fact that God keeps sending this message through multiple people the exact same way. Well, here's your next fill in the blank. God is very patient with his people. God is very patient with his people. Isaiah got the message going. Jeremiah carries it all the way until the tree actually gets chopped, which is what's called exile. They were actually invaded by Babylon into Jerusalem, and the city was destroyed, the temple was destroyed, and the people were carried off to Babylon. And so that was what the chopping of the tree actually looked like. We'll talk about that in more detail next time we're together. But first, let's see how Jeremiah's ministry starts. Let's look at Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 6. It says, "The Lord said to me in the days of King Josiah, have you seen what she did? That faithless one, Israel? And how she went up on every high hill and under every green tree, and there played the whore? And I thought, after she has done all this, she'll return to me. But she did not return. And her treacherous sister Judah saw it. She saw that for all the adulteries of that faithless one, Israel, I had sent her away with a decree of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but she too went and played the whore. Because she took her whoredom lightly, she polluted the land, committing adultery with stone and tree. Yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah did not return to me with her whole heart, but in pretense, declares the Lord." Does that sound very familiar to you? I mean, there's a lot of the same imagery that we see in the book of Hosea. Remember, that's who we were looking at last time. Remember, he married a prostitute to teach what Israel was doing to God. Gomer, his wife, cheated on him over and over and over again and broke Hosea's heart, which was a picture of Israel cheating on God over and over and over again with other gods and breaking God's heart. And so now Jeremiah is saying to Judah, dude, you saw what Israel did. You saw what your sister Israel did and what happened to her. And Assyria wiped them out. That was God's divorce from Israel in a sense. So Judah here is acting the exact same way, the exact same problem. And it's like, what do you think is going to happen next, Judah? Probably the same thing that happened to Israel. Now, maybe you read these stories and you realize that the exile is coming and it sounds terrible. And you might be thinking, I just feel really bad for Judah. And you might even be thinking, well, why is God so mean to Judah? He should be more patient. Well, imagine for a second, you're driving on 74 towards the river, okay? And there's a sign there, and it says, bridge out, detour. But you just keep on going. And then there's another sign, bridge out, detour. But you keep on going. And you see another sign, and then another sign, and then another sign. And then you get to a sign with flashing lights. And then there's a barricade set up there. And you plow right on through it. And then there's a bridge worker there going, hey, stop. But you just run him over. Keep on going towards the bridge. How do you think this story ends, church? Probably with you getting a little wet, right? So here's the thing. If you were falling into the river off the bridge at that point, would you be yelling, that's not fair? How many signs and warnings do you need? And here's the thing. Judah already saw her sister Israel go off the bridge first. She's still not stopping. She's still going right forward. There's warning after warning after warning, but their foot is still on the accelerator. Do you think God was fair in the number of warnings that he gave them? Generations of prophets warning them. Well, let's look at Jeremiah 7:25. Let's see if we can answer that question. Did God give them enough warning? It says, from that day, from the day that your fathers came out of the land of Egypt to this day, I have persistently sent all my servants, the prophets, to them day after day. For hundreds of years, God sent prophets every day warning Israel and Judah. There are 55 different prophets in Scripture that we know about, and who knows how many more weren't written down. Warning after warning after warning. How can anybody say that Judah didn't know what was going to happen? So what's going on here? Why are they doing all this bad stuff? What is their motivation? If they're getting warnings, but they're doing it anyway, what is going on with them? Well, Jeremiah actually makes it very clear throughout his entire book. In Jeremiah 5:23, it says, "But this people has a stubborn and rebellious heart. They have turned aside and gone astray." Jeremiah 6:28, "They are all stubbornly rebellious, going about with slanders. They are bronze and iron, all of them act corruptly." Jeremiah 7:24 says, "But they did not obey or incline their ear, but walked in their own counsels and the stubbornness of their evil hearts, and went backward and not forward." We read it again in Jeremiah 9:14 and 11:10 and 44:16. Jeremiah says over and over and over again, the problem is you guys are too stinking stubborn. You are too stubborn. That's the problem. 100% they're stubborn, rebellious hearts. Here's your next fill in the blank, church. This applies to us as well. Our biggest problem is our stubborn, rebellious heart. Our biggest problem is our stubborn, rebellious heart. So let's look at this from Judah's perspective for a second. Jeremiah 18:12. "But they say, that is in vain. We will follow all our own plans, and will everyone act according to the stubbornness of his evil heart." A more plain English translation of that would be, "We don't care what you say, God. We're going to continue to do what we want, even if it's evil." Judah was stubborn, just like we're often stubborn today. We might not be Israel, but we're all still a part of God's creation. And I think sometimes we think only Christians or only Jews are supposed to actually try to strive for holiness. But the reality is all of creation is God's possession, and God can do with it what he wants. We're not on a level to sit around and try to reason our way with God. One day we're all going to have to answer for what we've done. God is going to have some hard questions for people. And if we're honest, most things we do in our lives are about us. We concern ourselves with things like my identity and my preference, and don't judge me, and I'm going to do me. And if it doesn't break our law or offend another person or make us uncomfortable, then it meets our own definition of morality, and we're okay with it. But then we see what God says about it, the issue, and how do we respond to that? We either deny his authority, or we change what he said, or we deny his existence, or we just ignore the issue altogether. Our society tends to look at the word of God and they react to it like Twisted Sister. We're not gonna take it. But it's funny because then a plane hits the World Trade Center, or there's a mass shooting or some other disaster, and we switch to Irving Berlin and we start singing, "God bless America." That turned around fast. And that's basically what's going on here in Judah. Bottom line, God is going to judge us according to his standard of righteousness. It's not going to matter if abortion or slavery or drunkenness or anything like that is illegal. It doesn't matter. We can't say, well, it was legal, God, so we did it. Will it matter if we think that laziness or lying or gluttony are acceptable behaviors? All that's really going to matter is what God says about it. We're all his creation. We are not independently powerful. We are not autonomous. We are completely dependent on God for our existence. And if we want God on our side, then we better make sure it's because we moved over to his side. Now, lately, I've been spending a lot of time on Twitch, and I realize most of us probably have no idea what Twitch is. If you don't know, it's a streaming platform that a lot of people use to stream video games, but I stream drumming on it. And I like it because it's interactive, and you really get to form community with people. And so I hang out with some Christian streamers, but I also hang out with a lot of non-Christian streamers. And it's been shocking to me what the world looks like sometimes. And I see people talking about their depression and their mental disorders and their broken marriages, and they're feeling worthless because they can't find a job or they can't make ends meet. And honestly, my heart breaks for these people when I read all this stuff. And I'm thinking, Jesus is the answer for all this stuff. If you could just get into the Word and spend time in prayer and grow in Christian community and get to know the God that made you and loves you, things would be so much better. And it's hard because I really want to evangelize, and I do, but sometimes it's hard because there are chat rules. And so sometimes witnessing is about the long game. So I encourage them and I drop hints about what God has done. And then when they come over to my stream, I can talk about Jesus all I want. But it's interesting because I'm talking to some people who know God, but I also talk to some who are confused and some that downright hate him. And so it's challenging. And all the while, what they don't know is that when they're talking on their streams about how much they hate God, I'm over here brokenhearted and praying. praying, God, give me the right words and give me the ability to be bold or to be patient or whatever it is you need in this moment, and put someone in their life to show them the truth. Have you ever been brokenhearted for the people around you? See, wanting good for them is hard, especially when you seem to want good for them more than they want it for themselves. And here's what we can learn about where Jeremiah's position is with these people in Judah. Is your next fill in the blank. We should care about God's relationship with others. We should care about God's relationship with others. That's where Jeremiah is for Judah. He sees them going after other gods. He sees them abandoning the one true God. He sees them acting like the world, and he's broken. And this is where Jeremiah gets his nickname, the weeping prophet. Because let's look at Jeremiah 9:1-3. It says, "Oh, that my head were waters and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. Oh, that I had in the desert a traveler's lodging place, that I might leave my people and go away from them. For they are all adulterers, a company of treacherous men. They bend their tongue like a bow. Falsehood and not truth has grown strong in the land. For they proceed from evil to evil, and they do not know me, declares the Lord." And so from chapters 8-20, we see Jeremiah grieving over the nation that he serves because they've turned away from the God that they should be serving. And Jeremiah's trademark is his deep sadness over Judah and their separation from God. As a matter of fact, tradition actually asserts that Jeremiah wrote the book of Lamentations, or at least part of it. And the author is anonymous, but evidence comes from the book of Chronicles. In 2 Chronicles 35:25, it says, "Jeremiah also uttered a lament for Josiah, and all the singing men and singing women have spoken of Josiah and their laments to this day." So tradition plus that verse gives us an idea that Jeremiah likely wrote Lamentations. And it's an interesting book because Lamentations was written after Judah was exiled, after the divorce. And next week, we're really going to look at that process when King Nebuchadnezzar invades Jerusalem and destroys the temple and captures the prominent people. It's the worst moment in Jewish history by far up until that point. And it's also the things that the prophets have been warning them about the entire time. Lamentations is a collection of about 5 poems about this very horrible moment. They're about pain and grief and protest and confusion. One of the poems actually personifies Jerusalem as a widow who's miserable and grieving over her loss, and no one comes to help. The second one is about the fall of Jerusalem. The third one is about a suffering man. And that's the only poem that actually has any hope in that whole book. The fourth poem compares how things used to be compared to how they are now. Kids used to have fun, but now they beg for food, and we used to have feasts, and now we're starving. And then the last poem is a communal prayer for mercy from God. They call out to him and they beg him not to forget them. And what we can learn from the book of Lamentations is, church, we still have a voice in our pain. It's okay to struggle as we suffer. It's okay to ask God why he does things. If God wasn't okay with that, Lamentations wouldn't have made it into the Bible. There's nothing that you can say to God where he's going to go, "Really? I didn't know you felt that way." So here's what we need to know, church. Last fill in the blank. It's okay to be honest with God. It's okay to be honest with God. We don't always have to pretend like everything's okay. We don't always have to put on the church smile. "Oh, I'm blessed, brother," when inside we're miserable. That's actually one reason we have the church. It's a place where we can go when we have struggles. And we can say, "Hey, you know what? I'm not doing real great right now. Can you pray for me?" See, Jeremiah loves Judah and he loves God and he's brokenhearted and he's praying for restoration. And when it goes bad, he cries out to God, "Oh, please forgive us and restore us to you." And what's interesting is Lamentation ends in kind of a challenging, stark way. The very last verse of Lamentation, in 5:22, it says, "Do all this stuff, God, unless you've utterly rejected us and you remain exceedingly angry with us." The end. That's the way it ends. God, please, unless you're just done with us. And that's it. He leaves it in God's hands. You know, when we were in California, we had a bunch of really old cars. I think the average age of our vehicles was 21 years, and we were paying out something like $500 a month on broken stuff every month because it was just like, it was always the water pump was going out, alternator was going out. We were always having to fork out money on these cars. And I remember at a certain point, we were driving down the highway, and the hood pops up. So I'm driving with the hood up, and by the way, if that ever happens to you, there's a little gap underneath you can see when you're driving. So just keep that in mind. You can always poke your head out the window too. But so, and of course I'm thinking, well, great, here's the next one. So I pulled over into Home Depot parking lot, got a bungee cord, bungeed the hood down, and The hood just talked to the other cars the whole way to the rest of our destination. So I had people praying for me. I wasn't very happy with the car situation. And every once in a while, somebody would say something to me like, well, at least you have a car. I'm like, yeah, I don't like you very much. Because it's really important for us to have perspective on God, right? And to be thankful. Gratitude are wonderful things. But the truth is, we don't have to lie to ourselves. Sometimes we can say, Lord, I don't like this. This is hard. Please don't forget me. We should always trust God, but we can also be honest with God about our faults. He's our Father. He loves us. It's okay to say, Lord, I know in the end that this is all going to work out, but right now, this is hard.